Hi, and welcome to Human Resource Strategy and Change Management, Lecture 1.1, Introduction to Change. Let's look at first defining change. Change is considered to be a transition from one state to another, which can be apparent and predictable, so anticipated in the future, for example, entering secondary school or starting up a business, or hidden and evident only in retrospect, so revealed in the past. This is very much true when we look at physical maturity during the lifespan. It involves content or features, so the what, and the process, the how. It is evidenced by a discrete shift, like an event, or a series of shifts, like a gradual movement. It is described in relation to certain reference points, when change started, when the transition happened, and when change ended. We often look at the causes and effects which have contributed to the current state, and it can be planned or unplanned. So when we look at planned change, this involves a movement from one state to another via a series of predetermined steps that ultimately lead to an end goal. However, if we look at this from an organisational perspective, while change may be planned in the sense that it has been initiated by senior management, it still may be considered unplanned to workers as senior management haven't communicated it properly. Therefore, change can both be considered planned from one person's perspective and unplanned from another person's perspective. In looking at change in varying contexts, let's start first with the individual context and some of the different concepts. Firstly, individuals may be viewed as initiators of change. In this case, change is anticipated. Recipients of change, so this is when change is unanticipated, or observers of change, and this is both. The change experience is also very much open to the effects of individual differences. So this includes how people think and feel about the change itself. It is often mediated by past experiences, beliefs, attitudes, circumstances, and expectations. It can lead to profound self-awareness and learning, and the perceived gravity, speed, and impact of change may be different from person to person. Change is also in the eye of the beholder, and what this means is that it is a very subjective experience. So let's examine the experience of a senior manager who has moved house 18 times before. On one hand, she may be better equipped at handling and coping with change when compared to her colleagues, but on the other hand, she may simply not have the reserves left to deal with the contingency planning and uncertainty that comes with change. It can also be experienced collectively and individually, and this will hold different significance and meaning. It can also be institutionalized as a right. For example, in different cultures, change is seen as a rite of passage. So some specific examples of this include the coming of age, graduating from university, or getting married. Let's now look at change from an organisational context. Given that organisational change is an applied field, it does require a multidisciplinary knowledge approach to actually understand. So we need to look at the contribution from both established disciplines and emerging disciplines. Some of these include finance, which looks at change from a risk management perspective, management, which looks at it from an organisational behaviour and logistics perspective, marketing, which looks at it from a brand management and buying behaviour perspective, economics, psychology, and some other specialisations as well. We also need to acknowledge that in an organisational context, there is often a lot more at stake. Some of the reasons involve because it involves numerous individuals. There are often more rigid parameters and procedures to follow, and people who initiate the change and are involved in the change need to assume greater responsibility over some of the outcomes. We also consider a couple of questions that are applicable in an organisational context, And these are: when can change actually be considered successful? And is there even such thing as 100% success? In the context of change in organisations, we can also view organisational members as creators of change goals and strategies, implementers of change, and recipients of change. We also look at how change is approached and dictated by both locus of change and mode of change. With respect to locus of change, what we're primarily interested in is whether or not its origin is internal or external to the organisation. With mode of change, we look at whether change is naturally occurring, whether it's a function of interrelationships, or whether it's instrumental in serving a specific purpose. Lastly, let's take a look at the concept of interventionism and its various components. Interventionism is an approach that takes an internal and instrumental view to change management. And the fundamental principles of interventionism are that change is controlled and mandated internally, an intervention is used to achieve a utilitarian or intended outcome, and it is mandated by top management, but can take a top-down or bottom-up approach. The implementation of change interventions has been something that has been led by theorists and practitioners who believe that the loci of change is internal and who see change as serving an intended purpose within an organisation. So within this area of change are two main schools of thoughts, and these relate to organisational development and strategic management. So let's compare and contrast these two now. Firstly, when we look at organisational development, it is an offshoot of the human relations movement, which was very much concerned with studying the behaviour of people in groups, particularly in the workplace. It also takes a bottom-up approach, which sees a lot of merit in employee involvement in the change process. It is focused on present change processes and targets. It focuses more on people and the various group dynamics, leadership and communication. It makes use of feedback loops to adjust action in the change process. Change interventions make use of the Johari window, team building and empowerment. It is quite heavily focused on developing people and organisations. And it criticises the strategic management approach for its apparent lack of regard for and understanding of people. In contrast, we have the strategic management movement. So this arose from industry-sponsored research and looks very heavily at business policy that revolves around operations, finance, marketing, and so on. Strategic management, in contrast, takes a top-down approach, where employees are expected to follow the directions issued by top management. It is concerned with future goals, how they can be attained, and the various stakeholders involved. While strategic management focuses on structure, function, and motivation, it is also very much focused on goal attainment. Change interventions include downsizing, business process restructuring, and communications. It is focused on driving change to achieve individual and organisational goals. And it criticises the organisational development approach for its apparent lack of pragmatism, process focus, and internal perspective.